This aircraft is specifically designed to destroy targets in remote geographic areas and deep in the rear of continental theaters of operation.
It began with a low, distant rumble over the Kazan skyline. Then, the glint of white steel slicing through the clouds. This was no ordinary flight test. It was a resurrection.
This aircraft was unofficially dubbed White Swan because of its power and grace.
A Cold War ghost re-engineered for the 21st century, returning not with dust, but with fire. And as it climbed, so did the message. Russia's airborne monster is awake again. And it's going to be harder to stop than ever before. The resurrection of a giant. In a sprawling hangar near the city of Kazan, steel meets memory. This is where Russia's most ambitious aviation revival quietly accelerated, far from the front lines of global attention. The Tu-160M2, a name almost surgical in its designation, is anything but ordinary. It is the rebirth of the largest, fastest, and most heavily armed bomber ever built. A machine once conceived in the heat of the Cold War, and now reborn in a time of cold calculations. After decades of silence and a halted production line, the Russian Ministry of Defense ordered not just upgrades, but full-scale reactivation. Engineers didn't simply dust off old blueprints. They digitally refit the bomber with next-generation avionics, a glass cockpit, satellite-guided navigation, and redesigned NK-32-02 engines that could outlast the original's fuel-thirsty demands. But this wasn't just about modernization. Each new Tu-160 that emerges from Kazan isn't just a weapon, it's a statement. A message encoded in titanium and jet fuel that Russia, despite sanctions and aging fleets, still knows how to build something the world cannot ignore. A bomber that doesn't need to cross borders to shift the balance of power. It only needs to take off. Born to counter a superpower. The Tu-160 didn't begin as a bomber. It began as a rebuttal. In the late 1960s and early 70s, United States defense projects had shifted the balance of aerial dominance. The Rockwell B-1 Lancer, sleek, fast, low-flying, was poised to redefine what a strategic bomber could do. It could breach Soviet airspace undetected, strike with nuclear precision, and vanish before retaliation. For the Soviet Union, this was unacceptable. A response had to come, louder, larger, and more imposing. By 1981, that response had wings. The Tupolev Design Bureau unveiled the Tu-160, a sweeping departure from previous Soviet bombers. It was not a sluggish, high-altitude brute like the Tu-95 Bear. It was a supersonic weapon carrier capable of flying twice the speed of sound. Variable sweep wings gave it agility across all altitudes, while 4 Kuznetsov NK-32 engines, each powerful enough to lift a passenger airliner, gave it range and roar. Strategically, the Tu-160 was designed to evade Western radar by exploiting speed and altitude, not stealth. Its long, needle-pointed nose, coated in radar-reflective white paint, concealed a sophisticated terrain-following radar. And its mission profile didn't require crossing enemy lines. With standoff missiles like the KH-55, it could launch nuclear payloads from thousands of kilometers away and never breach NATO airspace. What made the Blackjack terrifying wasn't just its size or firepower, it was what it represented. A shift from defense to global strike capability. A machine that announced in no uncertain terms that the Soviet Union could hit back just as hard, from just as far. At the height of the Cold War, this was more than deterrence. It was a promise embedded in titanium. If the skies were ever to open with fire, Russia would not arrive second. Engineering a supersonic shadow. It's often called the White Swan for its elegant profile, but beneath the shine, the Tu-160 is a machine of brutal intent. Every curve and calculation serves one purpose: to deliver destruction across oceans, without warning and without being stopped. At 54 meters long, with a fully extended wingspan of 55 meters, the Tu-160 holds the record as the world's largest and heaviest supersonic combat aircraft ever built. But despite its bulk, it moves with alarming grace. The aircraft's variable sweep wings are its secret weapon in the sky. At low speeds, they stretch wide to maximize lift and control, especially on long-haul missions or when landing. But when speed matters, they tuck in like a predator folding for attack, reducing drag and slicing through the air at over 2,000 kilometers per hour. No other strategic bomber flies this fast. Its range, more than 12,000 kilometers, allows it to reach any continent without aerial refueling. That reach, combined with the ability to carry 12 long-range KH-55 or KH-101 cruise missiles, makes the Tu-160 less a bomber and more a global strike platform. Each missile can be armed with a nuclear or conventional warhead and launched from deep inside Russian territory, well beyond the grasp of enemy defenses. Inside, the modernized Tu-160M2 trades analog dials for multifunctional glass displays and full digital control. The pilots operate in a cockpit updated for 21st century warfare, guided by GLONASS satellite systems and next-gen communication arrays. But even with all the technology, the aircraft's most dangerous trait remains its silence. It does not need to announce itself. Once airborne, the Tu-160 can disappear into the sky, curve around radar corridors, and deliver a payload before its presence is ever confirmed. It is, by design, a supersonic shadow. The hypersonic upgrade. For decades, the Tu-160's threat was defined by speed, size, and distance. But now, its danger lies in what it carries, specifically what it might soon carry. In 2020, Russia began testing a hypersonic variant of the Ko-101 cruise missile, potentially deployable from the Tu-160 platform. Unlike traditional cruise missiles, these weapons are designed to exceed Mach 10, traveling at more than 12,000 kilometers per hour. At that speed, they don't just outrun fighter jets, they outrun time to respond. A hypersonic missile changes the game not by being unstoppable, but by being uncatchable. Its unpredictable flight path, paired with blistering velocity, makes it nearly impossible for existing missile defense systems to track, much less intercept. Traditional early warning radars and interceptor networks, systems built with subsonic or even supersonic threats in mind, simply can't keep up. By the time a launch is detected, the window to act has already closed. Integrating such weapons into the Tu-160 isn't just a technical upgrade, it redefines the aircraft's role in global strategy. The bomber is no longer a slow-moving giant meant to follow nuclear protocol. It becomes a first-strike enabler, capable of launching a precision hypersonic attack from thousands of kilometers away with virtually no warning. This convergence of old and new, Cold War airframe, next-gen warhead, marks a turning point. The Tu-160 no longer threatens simply because of what it did in the past, but because of what it can now do in the near future. It embodies a military doctrine where legacy systems aren't retired, they're reborn with teeth sharper than before. And if these new missiles enter regular deployment, the Tu-160 may soon deliver not just symbolic flights of power, but practical, uncounterable force. For adversaries, the nightmare isn't the plane, it's what follows behind it. The political signal in the sky. When a Tu-160 takes off, it's never just a test flight. Western radar arrays light up across Scandinavia and the United Kingdom. Early warning stations alert command centers, and fighter jets scramble from Norway, Britain, or Sweden, not to engage, but to shadow. The bomber rarely strays from international airspace, yet its very presence near NATO borders is enough to trigger political reaction. It is, in effect, an airborne press release, written in contrails and jet thunder. Russia refers to these as routine patrols, often describing them as exercises in strategic readiness. But the subtext is louder than the engines. We are here, we are operational, and we are watching. When a Tu-160 circles the Barents Sea or skirts the edge of the North Atlantic, it reminds the world that deterrence isn't confined to missile silos or submarine bays. It can have wings. These flights often coincide with geopolitical flashpoints, NATO drills, arms talks, or escalating tensions in Eastern Europe. The timing is intentional, the message is calibrated. In many ways, the Tu-160's most effective weapon is visibility. Its silhouette, instantly recognizable by defense analysts, becomes a symbol of posture and power. But to Russia, this isn't provocation, it's assertion. The blackjack flies not to cross lines, but to draw them. In an era of digital warfare and invisible networks, the appearance of a strategic bomber on radar is oddly analog and brutally clear. The old tools still work, especially when everyone is watching. What the West fears most. The Tu-160 is not stealthy in the modern sense. It doesn't vanish from radar or cloak itself in silence. Instead, it does something more unsettling. It endures. In a defense landscape obsessed with drones and satellites, the continued relevance of this decades-old bomber unsettles analysts and generals alike. What the West fears most isn't just its payload, but its symbolism. It represents a strategy that doesn't rely on novelty. Instead, it repurposes legacy strength with surgical upgrades. While Western air forces phase out older platforms, Russia refines theirs into sharper tools. And in doing so, it bypasses the predictable arms race of stealth versus detection. The Tu-160 doesn't hide, it dares others to respond. Think tanks across Europe and North America have repeatedly flagged the Tu-160M2 as a wildcard in future conflicts. Its ability to launch nuclear or hypersonic weapons from deep within Russian territory neutralizes many layers of Western defense. And its integration into patrol routes near NATO's edge ensures it's never out of mind for long. For the West, this plane is not just a weapon, it's a warning. A reminder that dominance isn't always about invisibility. Sometimes, it's about showing up in broad daylight, fully armed and completely unconcerned. In a world racing towards silent wars fought in code and satellites, the Tu-160 is a thunderous reminder that power still moves with wings. If this story changed how you see the skies, subscribe for more. Because some threats don't whisper, they roar.